Hello, I'm just in the middle of making a simple little pigtail adapter here to go from this power supply. I've got ring terminal outputs on the back of it, and I want to have just a little pigtail to Anderson power pole, since that's what I put on the power connector wire for my ham radio. So in the process of that, putting my connectors on here, and I was looking at my crimps thinking, well, they're okay. I'm no professional and I don't have all the best crimping tools in the world. This stuff is probably fine, but I thought, I could hedge my bets with just a little dollop of solder on each end of these. So I'm going to use my brand new Weller soldering wand here and just put a little dot on each one just to kind of ensure the long life and good connection that I'm working on here on these. Right, my initial impression of this soldering iron is very good. It's not plugged in. You can't normally touch this when it heats up, but I've not plugged this in just yet. I'm just looking it up. There's a little flat spot here just to keep it from rolling away. If it happens to get set down, it can only roll to that flat spot. That's kind of a thoughtful touch. There are LEDs in here that I will be showing when it's in operation. Simple but effective little stand you can use to keep it in place on your workbench. I gotta be honest, I have not the slightest idea what this tool that they include is for. It appears to be made out of like an ABS plastic. There's a little notch in the end of this guy. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not a professional, not on the up and up of what this is for, so I likely won't be using it. But they give you a little dollop of sample solder and two more fine point tips, and you get the wider chisel tip there. For this project, I think I am going to want the medium tip for the particular job, and this is pretty easy to change. As I said, obviously the iron has to be cool. You can't be messing with the business end of it when you are, using it or have been using it, but there's just a little set screw. Set this in there. I think I'll go in about as far as I can since, well, yeah, I don't like it to be any longer than it has to be, just a personal preference. So now I've got a finer point tip for this smaller job that I'm going to be doing there, and that was really easy, really simple. I'll be firing that up. I'm excited about it. I'm replacing my original and my only soldering iron that I've had for over 10 years. This is a beauty. I want to say this was like a $5 Walmart purchase back in the day. Look at the wore out tip on that thing. None of my friends believe me that this is my only soldering iron. I don't do that much. I'm not a professional, not even that skilled with it, but anyways, to make sure these connections are good, I'm gonna do 4 little dabs, one on each end of these 2 wires. I'll probably put down a little something here. I'll plug it in, get it heating up. We'll see how that goes. Alright, let's do a little horrible example of soldering. Absolutely no part of this video is intended to be construed as a how-to or instructions on the proper use of this product. I am not a trained person, just an amateur hobbyist, so, you know, take that for what it's worth. The LEDs on the end of this are nice. I get a good little bit of illumination. Obviously on my workbench I already am working with pretty bright light overhead, but sometimes I have to solder under the dash of my car or in different tight places that aren't in the comfort and warmth of my inside of my house, so having these LEDs under the dash of the car or similar is actually a much appreciated little feature here. In hindsight, for this 12 gauge wire here, I probably would have been a-okay just using the chisel tip for this, but yeah, I wanted to show how to change it anyways, so it might take a little longer for this to heat up with that fine point. It's a 60-watt soldering iron. It's only been plugged on since just before I started recording, so putting some heat into this. Probably just gonna take a moment here. Oh, it's starting to flow a little bit. I gotta get a little warmer yet, but it's getting there at a pretty good rate. This is not an adjustable soldering iron, which is kind of to my preferences. If I had settings, me being the amateur hack that I am, I wouldn't know what to set it to anyways. Maybe someday I'll work up to that level. All I want to do is, have a hot one so that I can do a little bit of basic, real simple jobs like this. Just feel better about my projects if there's a little bit of solder involved to ensure the longevity of a connection that I care about. So I'll use the little stand there carefully. The whole wire is hot, and that is hot. You should probably be wearing gloves when you're doing stuff like this. Again, not meant to be construed as instructions, but I think the 60 watts is pretty legit because both ends of this wire are pretty toasty right about now. Even through the silicone jacket of that whole wire is very hot. So, good thing, I believe. Looks like my LEDs maybe are acting up a little. It's interesting. They're I don't know if it's showing up on camera, but they're varying in brightness a little. I don't think they have any settings. Interesting. Now they're bright. Getting a little flicker though. Hello? Well, I don't really care if the LEDs are a little bit something. This is going to be a touch trickier because you can screw up the ability of your Anderson power pole connector to function as intended if you goober too much solder into the end of it. Honestly, you shouldn't be putting solder at all on an Anderson power pole connector, as I'm well aware, but I tend to do it anyways just because I can. And in hindsight, like I said, the chisel tip would have been just fine for this project, I think, where I'm trying to just kind of heat up an entire connector and wire and stuff all together. That's alright. I'll maybe change it back later since it's so easy to do. Oops. This is not how you're supposed to use helping hands. This is not really how you're supposed to use any of this type of stuff. So if it makes you feel better about how you're soldering and how your projects go, there are a few of us hacks out here, and this is just kind of how we get some stuff done. There we go. Now it took solder. That's all I wanted. All I wanted was for a little dab of solder to flow into the end of the connector and bond with the wires. Not sure if that's actually what happened, but that's my hope. Let me carefully pluck this off of here and just kind of fill the end of it a little bit with solder without, hopefully messing up the ability of the connector to go through into that. I'm going to do the same thing there with the red wire, and then we'll see how it turns out. Let's see if it's taking any solder yet. Yep, it's getting pretty hot now. There's a little warm-up period for this thing, and now I think we're plenty good and toasty. Now these wires are starting to go pretty quick, but we're just about at that temperature. Roll this over, get a little heat into the connector as well. There it goes. There it goes. Soaked a little bit up in there. Perfect. I can unplug that. I'll set it off to a safe space to let it cool in just a moment there. Just put a little solder in the end of the connector there. It just makes me feel better. Not necessarily what you're supposed to do for Anderson power pole. Definitely not exactly a prime example of how to solder, but you know, you gotta start somewhere, and doing the best I can. So if that helps you, give you any impression of the iron itself and how good it works, that's great. Happy with this wire from Anemia. That's doing good. Retained all its flexibility. Got a good solid connection here on these now, so got a little bit of excess there, that's okay. I can finish putting these together and I'll be ready to hook up to my power supply.